When we think about the Apostle Paul, who wrote a big chunk of the New Testament, we probably don't think about him ever struggling for words. I think when I think about him as somebody who's ready for an answer all the time. But listen to what he asked the Colossians to pray for him in chapter 4, starting in verse 2. Devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with an attitude of thanksgiving, praying at the same time for us as well, that God will open to us a door for the word, that we may speak forth the mystery of Christ, for which I have also been imprisoned, that I may make it clear in the way I ought to speak. When Paul was making these closing remarks in this letter, he's asking the people of Colossae to pray, to devote themselves to prayer. But one of the things he's asking them to pray for is that God would open a door for him to speak, and that when he speaks, he would speak clearly. And then he goes on in verse 5 to say, conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. And so he's asked for prayer for himself, but then he goes on to say, and you need to be ready as well. You need to have your eyes open. You need to be prepared to know how to respond to each person. And in these last few days, as we come up to Easter, I think it is a time of year when we can very naturally have some conversations about faith. But that will only happen if we are looking for those open doors, if we're praying that God would give us opportunity, and then if we're praying that God would help us to speak clearly. In the past few weeks, I've had some unexpected opportunities to share Jesus with people. And you might think, well, isn't that something that you do all the time? No, actually, it's not. When I'm in front of a camera, I can do it. When I'm standing in front of a larger group, I can do it. But one-on-one, that's hard for me. And in just the last few weeks, there have just been a few times where asking a question opened a door. And then with the Holy Spirit's help, I took baby steps through that door. And so I would encourage you in these last days before Easter to just be thinking, how can I look for opportunities to open the door? Can it be as simple as asking someone what they're doing for Easter and then sharing what you're doing for Easter? Can it be something as simple as saying, hey, my church is having some special services and events for the kids. If you're available, I'd love to have you come and sit with me and join me there. I would encourage us to do as Paul asked the Colossians. Let's begin by praying, even devoting ourselves to prayer, and then being on the alert for those doors that God opens. I believe that asking God for an opportunity to share the good news of Jesus isn't one of those prayers that we have to think about, well, is that really in God's will or not? It is in his will that we share. And so we can pray with confidence and we can speak with boldness, knowing that the Holy Spirit will enable us to say the right thing at the right time. But we also prepare our hearts by praying, by being in the Word, and by being on the alert, looking for opportunities.